Thanks very much, Nastasia. Yes, of course, we're eagerly anticipating 2 o'clock when Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will deliver the midterm budget policy statement. As you mentioned in your introduction there, a lot of issues that he has to encompass. Of course, Eskom's debt, what's going to happen to it. The public sector wage bill. Some unions have accepted the 3% increase, others have not, and are insisting on above inflation increases. So they're not likely to be happy that the midterm budget is going to push through with those 3% increases, and negotiations still continue. Of course, Minister Thulas Nxesi indicating that just because they're putting through the 3% in the midterm budget doesn't necessarily mean that negotiations are not continuing. But he says for the purposes of certainty, it's important to push that through. So one wonders, does that really augur well for certainty? Because at the end of the day, if the books are going to have to change in the medium term because a different results, that doesn't necessarily bode well for certainty. But of course, one of the other issues, apart from telling us about expectations of revenue and what they're going to spend money on, etc., and how they're going to try and bring down the debt, they also have to tell us, that is, the finance minister has to tell us, government initiatives to bolster economic growth, which we so badly need. And of course, one of the most important constituents in the economy is the SME area, small, medium enterprises. They need to be stimulated in order to create jobs. And the documented global evidence is that it's SMEs that actually create the most jobs. So to discuss this further, I'm joined by Sean Tennyson. He's the founder of Property Point, and his focus tends to be on the SME sector. Thank you very much for joining us, Sean. So, of course, we know that the SME sector has really gone through quite a lot, with COVID. And, of course, in KZN, for example, we did see the July unrest. There's been the floods. It's just been one knock after the other. We know that government has tried to come up with initiatives to help support the SME sector. How are we doing in this regard?
Yes, I think we've definitely seen a huge impact on small businesses. And I think when the minister had the budget speech earlier this year, there was a key focus around the bounce back scheme, where government has made provisions through National Treasury for 20 billion to support small businesses. I think what is expected from the speech today is being able to outline some of the impact of that budget speech. What's the access in terms of the uptake of the funding for small businesses? I think still, from a South African perspective, the access to funding for small businesses, due to the high level of regulatory and red tape, it does not create an opportunity for small businesses. So we hope to see that there's an update in that and that the minister will expand on that.
Yeah. You talk about red tape. It's not that long ago. I don't remember if it was the February budget or the midterm budget in the last year, where, of course, it was this year, where the president spoke about the introduction of a red tax czar in the form of Sipho Nkosi, a well-known businessman. How has that initiative impacted the SME sector and other businesses more broadly? Has it been impactful at all? Is there less red tape in the system?
I think when the president made the announcement around the commission to be able to reduce red tape, it was positively taken up by the business community, specifically small businesses. But we have not seen any action coming from that as yet. I think what we're always great on is the focus around the policy environment, but we need the implementation on the ground for small businesses. Is it able to make business easy for them? And we've not seen that as yet, and we would like the focus, and especially also the integration of the various departments within government to focus on that. So we're speaking about the Department of Trade and Industry, National Treasury, Department of Small Business, as well as the government agencies. The minister also spoke about an integrated master plan for small businesses. Part of the reducing that regulation, it needs to feed into that, but we need some more data and we need some more on-the-ground experience of small businesses. If you speak to a small business today, their ability to get a business registered, their ability to run their business is also still hampered by the high cost of red tape.
And of course, once they've got their businesses registered, they've got to face issues like a lack of electricity, a lack of water, and the expense thereof.
And we see that all these indirect elements that come into play, load shedding, water shedding, SOEs not being able to be fully functional, has a direct impact on small businesses. If you are operating your corner shop and you do not have access to electricity, you cannot serve your customers. And that's ultimately it, is that all these other factors has a huge impact on a constituency in South Africa that can create a huge contribution to job creation in South Africa and economic growth.
Sean, thank you so much for your insights there. Sean Tennyson, the founder of Property Point, giving us a sense of what's happening in the SME sector and the frustration that announcements are made about policy, but they're not really seen or felt on the ground. Let me hand you over now to Bulelani Philip for more information.
Well, thank you so much, Nompu. I can hear that in the background there's quite a lot of activity from some of the MPs that are actually making their way in here at the Cape Town City Hall, which is where the medium-term budget policy statement will be delivered by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. You'll recall that Parliament is still under, a dilapidated state following the fire that gutted the institution earlier this year. So the venue that has been decided upon for this midterm budget is right here behind me at the Cape Town City Hall. Of course, a lot of expectation. A short while ago, I did see the Finance Minister making his way into and briefly staying there to just check on the infrastructure to ensure that everything will be going smoothly. And of course, he's just left a short while ago. We do expect him, of course, to be making his way back here just before 2 o'clock ahead of the midterm budget policy statement. A lot of expectation from political parties. You've been hearing all along. Of course, the elephant in the room is going to be the issue of Eskom. Should the government let go of the institution and privatize it? Of course, if you do hear some political parties like the IFP, the DA, they do believe that this institution is actually draining the fiscus and should be privatized and give more competition to the private sector. But of course, you will have other political parties that are opposed to that venture of privatizing Eskom. Of course, the parties like the EFF as well as the PAC. Again, the issue that should be taking center stage here is the issue of labor relations between labor unions representing government workers as well as government. You'll recall that there has been this labor impasse relating to the wage increases for government employees, government resolving to give workers a 3% wage increase instead of that demand of a 10% wage increase. Whether that will leave the government as well as labor unions, that's something we'll really have to look into. Of course, the other issue that the Finance Minister will have to give us an update on is the issue of economic reforms that have been announced over the past year or so. Will the government stick to its program, or will we see further radical announcements by the Finance Minister this afternoon? Of course, speaking to the the Minister in the Presidency, Mondli Gungumbele, a short while ago, is saying that government is going to stick to its fiscal consolidation path as well as its announced economic reforms, and there is no expectation of any radical economic transformation announcements that are expected this afternoon. Of course, there are labor unions that have been, together with civil society, been picketing outside of this precinct. Of course, looking at the issues of social relief as well as the under expenditure of the social relief distress grant, where the 350 rands that are earmarked for the unemployed have not been coming as fast and effectively as they should. Of course, they want the government to ensure that the efficiencies in delivering those 350 grants are actually going to be coming through fast and efficiently. On that note, we'll be speaking to you just before the Finance Minister makes his way into the City Hall to give you a sense of what is the mood like here in the Cape Town CBD. On that note, we'll cross back to you guys in studio.